Man, I really hope this lav mic setup will work out because I'm not really happy with it, but it's the best that I can do. And just in case you want to know, the intro will be a little bit longer, so therefore you can skip it. But I have to start off with an FYI. This is the first time that I'm reviewing a Teufel product on its own in English. I once covered them alongside in a comparison, and the reason therefore is just this. Teufel is a German company, and they pretty much mostly sell in Germany. And they even told me once I asked if I should make English videos that I shouldn't really bother. But based on the comments that I got on the German videos, when I reviewed a few speakers in the past before, they told me that there is a lot of demand for that because they sell after all quite a lot in Europe. So I'm gonna take this video more of an experiment if there is some demand, and I also wanna just let you know that the reason why I haven't really made more speaker reviews as I once said is that I know that the speaker review crowd is a little bit harsher, even more so than the headphone ones. I also know that the room has a huge impact on how you judge the sound, and I also know that my room is anything but ideal. So therefore I had a little bit of a kind of hurdle to get over that. So in case you want to see more, let me know that in the comments, let me know that with a like, so I know it's actually worth it, because I still have a harder time to get motivated to review this because I want it, but I also know that it's hard to give you what you want, especially since I will not really get into too much details in this video, since these cost about 500 euros, which is something that I still kind of consider like entry level, or let's say like upper entry level, and therefore I don't want to overwhelm a few people, which I've seen in the past on some of the videos that I did. So I'm gonna keep it down to the basics, as easy for you to understand, but still try to give you some information, especially if you should buy them or not. So let's actually start off with the product itself. These are the Teufel Ultima 40 MK3 2018. So that's the newest model. I have them here for about 4 months, even though I didn't use them that much, I have to say, because as much as you would expect, especially since I've reviewed so many headphones and phones, and I just didn't get the time. That is definitely something, because with speakers it's a little bit harder to rearrange them, place them differently, try a different pair and so on, especially since this room is so small that I can pretty much only use one pair at a time. So that made it a little bit harder for me. But 500 euros for the passive version. There is also for 800 euro an active version. Now, here's the thing that I would recommend you. If you know that you are only gonna use these as a stereo pair, I would maybe recommend you to go for the active ones, because these might make more sense. 300 euros that you pay more, you get obviously the amplification inside of them, you get the base or the minimum amount of ports, you even get Bluetooth functionality, and you are fully covered. And I don't think if you will buy a separate stereo amplifier or maybe even an AV receiver that you will get that sound for that money. Usually, if you would take the passive ones, you would need, I would say, at least a decent stereo amp at around 500, maybe 300, a used one. But generally, I would say at least 500 to get a good bass. But if you know that you are gonna use these as an entry level and sometimes upgrade, you can buy something better, then it's no problem. But if you know stereo is the way you're gonna keep it, I mean, for example, you could also use the active ones up to 4.0 or 4.1. But in that case, since you're then paying more for those active ones as well, then you could think about getting an AV receiver. But generally, if you buy a separate stereo amplifier instead of an AV receiver, even at a similar price, those usually deliver a way better sound, which is something that I noticed once I switched from my AV receiver that I still have in my home theater to the Cambridge Audio Azure 851, which costs way more than these speakers. So let's just consider that. So if you want to use them as stereo and you have an amp already, that's the best thing. But if you want to buy one and maybe upgrade, you can get them. Otherwise, even though I haven't tried them, just stick with the active ones. But let's talk about the design right now. This is a three-way speaker system, and I don't think it really makes much sense to go into the actual drivers itself, because even if you would know what exactly these are, if you are an entry-level user, I don't think you need to know it, because I personally don't care. For me, it's the sound that matters, and how they achieve that doesn't really matter. I've noticed that from the past. You can have a two-way system that can sound way better than a three-way system or whatever else. Now, let's actually start off with the actual build quality. I have to say I like the design, I like the finish. For 500 euros, I have to actually say this surprised me, actually impressed me when I took them out of the box. Because obviously, if you look a little bit closer in the details, you see that it's pretty much just like the typical furniture build quality that you usually get, but it feels executed very well, especially also with the black front here. also the speakers are available in black, but I kind of like the contrast. And I know people told me that how could anyone possibly buy white speakers? Subjective thing, just like audio is, so why not? But everything is executed very well. It feels fine. Now let's get to the actual back. Here we can see the B-amping, obviously kind of ready speaker terminals. Even though I have to say at this price point, at this level, I don't think B-amping makes that much sense, especially since B-amping is very controversial itself. And for those who don't know what B-amping is, well, you usually split up the bass and then the mids with the highs, so these two are separate. But if you don't do that on the circuit board, it doesn't really help if you would kinda on your amplifier or receiver also use them as a B-amping setup. For example, my custom built speakers have these, and I would actually have to say that it's more of an imagination and you kinda more of a placebo effect that you think you get better sound because of the separation. So you are fine with those single terminals as well. I mean, I guess it doesn't cost much to include them and it's maybe easier to sell them, but yeah, that's not really something we need to get further into. Now we have also two bass ports. Now if you have them very close to the one and you have some issue with some boomy bass or just a little bit overwhelming bass, you can kind of close them up. Then it gets pretty much a closed speaker system. You lose out a little bit on sheer volume and bass, but you usually get a little bit more control inside. You don't get the boominess. And depending on your room, it might help. In my room, it was actually fine. I had enough space left so they could fully kind of, yeah, get the air around. Now, front looks nice with speakers. So in the design department, it's obviously subjective, but for the price, I like it. If you consider, for example, these ones on the sides, these are about the same price, two-way system, and they don't really look that appealing. So what you get here for the money is actually already pretty nice. So let's get into the sound. I'm gonna actually start off with the general thing that you should know about the way I judge speaker sound. If I have a headphone, I usually want it, I don't want to really say like super neutral or flat, but a little bit more on the not that boomy bassy side, and that it doesn't have to be super full and warm, and I want a lot of details in the highs. With speakers it's a little bit different, because there I kind of want a little bit of a room filling sound that is also quite rich, and I don't need all those details, because that, if I just watch movies or music is a little bit more fatiguing. So I'm okay with a little bit less details. And the way I would describe these, since they're also made for the entry level, more for the mainstream market, actually pretty right in the sweet spot, because you have a full warm room filling sound. The bass is a little bit on the definitely not thicker side, but on the more present side. It is maybe, obviously it's not the most precise, most tight bass. It is a little bit on the slightly boomy side, but as I said, that is a little bit also always dependent, actually not that little, on the room itself. But even not with an ideal room, there was just a little bit of boominess, but it was a full warm rich sound bass. Obviously, it could go even deeper in terms of bass or be a little bit more precise, but especially if you consider this to be 500 euros. If I think about how low this one plays and how good the bass is, and you could obviously extend it with a subwoofer, which I personally generally by now actually went away from, even on my home theater system. Okay, there I have a little bit more bass heavy speakers, just have more potential. But this is enough, especially if you live in a flat where you can't fully max out the volume, especially the bass anyways. These are more than bassy enough. It's a nice bass. And then getting to the mids, they give you a nice amount of details, especially vocals sound nice, full and warm. They sound a little bit distant, I noticed, because they are on one line with the instrument or with the rest of the thing that's going on. And then we have highs that are, I would say, definitely detailed enough for this price range. I actually didn't even expect them to be that clean. And generally a pretty pleasant sound experience. Highs are not too harsh, there is no sibilance, there is no kind of thinning out, if at all, maybe like in a little bit of the upper mid-range region. On some certain situations I noticed that, but I actually blame this more on the room. Because the last time when I, for example, had to kind of rearrange the room because I had to use it for something else, I had a lot of my absorption plates just stacked up in one place in the room, and I noticed how big of an impact that had in the room. And then the actual sound, even though it wasn't quite balanced anymore because all of those plates were on one place, the bass got more precision and everything was just more pleasant. So also just think about that. Before you spend maybe 1,000 euros in a speaker system, rather maybe pay 500 and then invest the rest of the 500 euros in a proper room acoustic treatment. Use some Basotect or some absorption plates, maybe some heavy curtains, use a thick carpet, and then some diffusing stuff. That will make a big difference, believe me, because, for example, my brother has a super unideal room that is also very tall. It's very naked around the walls, and they reflect a lot of sound, and it sounds terrible, which I have to say is not really that much better here, but at least the worst things are out of the way. So just keep that in mind. You don't really need to play, because if you fully max this out in terms of the room, you will get more out of that if you would have a pretty bad room with a €1,000 speaker. So, like I said, I didn't want to really talk too much about the sound itself, because I don't want to kind of bore you with stuff. All you should know is that, especially for movies, this one does a particularly well job, because everything is full. You get a lot of action, pretty impactful action. The room is filled with sound, which wasn't quite the thing on the active ones that I've reviewed, the network working ones. The highs give you a nice amount of detail. The sweet spot is good because it's actually a little bit wider one. They're pretty easy to set up. They give you a nice balanced sound. It's not like the bass was overwhelming in this time, or the mids were maybe too recessed, the highs were not high enough. So for this price range, the balance is actually very good. It's definitely improvable, but then you have to also pay a lot more. And especially if you consider what you get here in terms of design, build quality, and sound for 500 or even for 800 if you consider the active ones. I have to say this is really good stuff, because, for example, when I reviewed the Cambridge Audio, the smaller ones, the bookshelf speakers, those were also 500 and didn't nearly reach that sound. They didn't really reach that low in terms of sound. They didn't have the power in the mids or the clarity in the highs. So I'm not going to say this is the be of all end of all, but especially if you have a budget at around €1,000, then this is definitely one to consider for a stereo system, because you get some really good stereo speakers. If you use the active ones, you are with 800 already set. If you buy a stereo amp at around 1,000, it still works out, and then you can still expand. But that's something that you have to keep in mind. But yeah, I just have to give it to that. I actually didn't expect it to be that nice. I mean, it's not overwhelming, it's not crazy impressive or so, but at this price point, maybe actually even it is. Because when I compare these to the ones on the side, and I'm not going to spoil too much, then I noticed that the value actually of these ones is better than I would have expected. And obviously, this is the thing, once again, that I have to also mention. I haven't really reviewed many speakers yet, even though I used a lot in the past, but that has been a while, and I haven't really reviewed any in this price range. Usually I'm at a little bit of a higher price range, and then I just lack a little bit out of competition. So it's harder for me to judge that, but from the experience that I have in the past, this is actually already a pretty good starting point. And for some people, general users who just want a actually way better than just normal typical soundbar sound or TV sound, this will be a huge improvement. And this is also one thing to consider. People tell me, why should I pay like 500 or €1,000 for a sound? Now here's the thing, if you buy a TV, that one is outdated in 3, 5, at best 6, 7 years, especially with the recent current trends and how things evolve fast. But sound, if it's good once, there's not really that much improvement. I mean, they always have to do something to attract new buyers. But for example, I bought my first speakers and I had them for a few years. And then once again, and for example, the custom ones that I have right now, I have about 15 years already. And since these were state of the art back then, they are state of the art pretty much still now, because at the high end, it's these days about design, it's about the name, it's about the brand. And like in most all of situations, it's also a lot about the signature, because you can get more neutral speakers, you can get more ones that have more details in the highs, or you can have some more in the bass. These one cover everything pretty good already. They don't really have a specific point where they are the best. If at all, maybe it's delivering a little bit of a nicer, warmer bass, but that's it. I hope I haven't bored you too much. I hope it was good, and please let me know in the comments if you want more speaker reviews. I mean, in this kind of style. I don't want to go more detailed. I don't want to make too much B-roll, and I don't want to just talk about stuff that I don't care. I mean, I think I told you everything that you should know in terms of price, design, sound quality. And if I missed something, please let me know that in the comments so I can cover it in the review, in the next review. But especially a comment would tell me a lot if there is demand for videos like these that I enjoy, but usually, like I said, I have a little bit harder time to get over myself to actually make them. So that was that. Until next time, bye.